Hey guys, my name is Jim Delosier, and I am definitely an alcoholic. Where I come from, I say the reason I say my last name is because I might owe somebody amends in the room. I may owe you amends too, I don't know. My sobriety date is December 20th, 1994. I got sober when I was like 4, so you guys can do the math. I'm just kidding. I just turned 50 years old a month ago. And I got sober at 27 years old after 10 years of going in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. I almost didn't come tonight. I've been having some major stomach problems. And I got them. I was just talking with Dave before the meeting. I think I got them because I ate so much at the McGregor fight that I broke my stomach. I'm not kidding. I don't know what it is about me, but just because I've had enough doesn't mean I'm ready to stop. And it carries through to this day. So I'm 22 and a half years sober. I got sober in Orange County, California. That's where I'm from. I grew up in Corona del Mar, Newport Beach, cool little town in Newport Beach. Unlike most people in Alcoholics Anonymous, I never felt less than. I never felt apart from. I was always popular. I had a pretty girlfriend. I was good in school. I was great at sports. I got to surf every day. My parents loved me then. They love me now. I never had any emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, none of that stuff. I know, and you're sitting there thinking, well, fuck you, man. So if alcoholism had anything to do with being environmental, then it would have missed me. It would have clearly passed over me because I had this magical childhood. There was nothing wrong with me as a kid. What happened was I drank. And I found out when I drank that I liked it. And I went to a party with my friends. It wasn't the first time I'd had a drink, but this was the first time I had enough. I was 12 years old. I went to a party on Balboa Island with my friends. We rode our bicycles there, and when I got there, there was cases of beer stacked up in the kitchen. And so my friends and I were drinking the same beer out of the same cases, and I thought that they were having the same experience I was, but apparently they weren't. Because they all went on to finish college and live in mansions, and I moved to a warehouse and became a pimp. And I don't know exactly how that happened, but something, maybe the cans that I got were different. I don't know. Actually, I don't think that's what's happening. I think what happened was they didn't have alcoholism and I do. I have this thing called alcoholism. They talk about it in that book that our fellowship is named after. It's called Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a really good book. If you don't have it yet, you should get it. It's got all this information in there about this disease that I happen to have, and so I'm really, really partial to keeping the book safe. I try everything that I can. A lot of people consider me a rigid AA fundamentalist, and if Alcoholics Anonymous does for you what it has done for me, you will be just as willing, just as excited to defend Alcoholics Anonymous from all enemies, from without and within, to protect it and keep it safe so you can have an amazing life like I have. So at that party, we're drinking these beers, and I remember, it was not all that dissimilar from the rest of my life. I drank too much, I crashed my bicycle, and I got hurt, right? But it wasn't enough to tell me that I wouldn't do it again. What happens when I drink is I have this thing called the phenomenon of craving, and it's talked about in the doctor's opinion that when I take a drink, something happens to me both bodily and mentally which makes it virtually impossible for me to stop. But I didn't know that. It's funny, I was talking, my mom and I were chatting one day, and she was talking about, she said, I don't like to have more than 1 or 2 drinks because I feel like I'm losing control. And I was like, what are you talking about? What planet are you from anyway? Doesn't make any sense. I go after 1 or 2 drinks, not only to feel more in control of me, I feel more in control of you. I feel more in control of the whole room. In fact, I am empowered. And my mom looks at me and she goes, well, I don't get that. And I'm like, oh, no wonder you're not willing to go to prison for it, loser. God. So my mom doesn't have what I have either, but I have this thing called alcoholism, and I didn't know that I had it. I thought that when I was taking those drinks with those friends, that I was doing what they were doing. I was drinking with impunity, but that isn't the case. But I didn't know right then that I had it. But I kept drinking with those guys every opportunity that I had. And because the alcoholic life seems the only normal one, those friends, the ones that went on to live in mansions, they weren't around all that often for me because I found other people that like drinking more than they do. So those good friends got replaced by some not so good friends, who got replaced by some not so good friends, who got replaced by some pretty bad friends, which got replaced by bad friends, which got replaced by straight outlaws, convicts, hoodlums, scumbags, and losers. And that's what my life became. And I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know. If you would have asked me at 12 years old, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen to you in your life if you continue to drink, I would have said, no way, man. It just makes me feel good. Because it made me feel good. It did something for me that it doesn't do for my mom. It gives me a phenomenon. What it talks about in the book is we feel restless, irritable, and discontented unless we can again experience a sense of ease and comfort which comes by taking a few drinks. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity. And I kept thinking that I'm going to find the magic combination. I'm going to find a way to keep drinking. I'm not I don't like drinking. I love drinking guy. I love drinking. It was the most important thing in my life. It was more important than all my girlfriends, my cars, my freedom, my health, my happiness, all of my money, everything. I threw everything into the mix. I was willing to give every last scrap that I had to find a way to keep drinking. Because I like drinking. And that first time, the reward was huge and the consequences were nothing. I crashed my bike, so what? I got all this bam out of it, and I got a little crash, so what? At the end, it wasn't like that. At the end, I was drinking just trying to break even. And the days that I broke even were few and far between. And they got fewer and further between. But I kept trying, man. You got to hang in there. And I kept trying and trying and trying. And I don't want you to think that I had this ugly, miserable life. I didn't. I've traveled the world. I tell people about, I took my first 10 years of retirement right out of high school. I figure that's when you're supposed to take them, right? I've lived in Europe twice. I traveled all over. I played in a band. I modeled. I did all sorts of stuff. I had a great time. I knew a lot of important people. I'm from Orange County. There's everywhere you go, there's rock stars and celebrities and, you name it. The who's who of the underworld lived there. All over Southern California, everywhere I went, I had really, really important friends. And the problem was that being that I'm a sort of gregarious, outgoing kind of guy, well, I'm not really anyways, I'm kind of a dick, but when I would come to your party and I would, crap in your living room, people would say, well, it's just Jim Delosier, man, that's what you get. It is what it is, right? If you want him here, that's what happens. And so people co-signed my crap for years. They were willing to say, just let it slide, no big deal, right? It's all good. So by the time I was 17 years old, I was already I'd already tried a lot of the low level. I was on the first Hobie skate team when I was 10 years old. So I was in the around all the cool skaters back then. I played volleyball in the Junior Olympics when I was 12. I did all sorts of fun stuff. I surfed every day. I was sponsored. When I was in 7th grade, our school surf contest. The guy that had just won for the United States for 15 and under, I beat him in our school surf contest. I was actually a talented surfer. I had all these things. I played in a band, and the band that I was playing in, the guys went on to be in a multi-platinum band. But when it came time to practice, I decided to just sit in the living room and drink, and I didn't practice with them, and they went on without me. My life passed before me because I was busy following what I thought was in my best interest, which was alcohol and drugs. And I just kept doing it, and kept doing it, and kept doing it. And I kept getting arrested, and I kept getting into trouble. But I was the nice kid from Corona Del Mar. And my mom would show up in court before Al-Anon, and she would come, and she would stand there, and they would let me out. And, by the time I was, but before I was 21, I had 6 drunk drivings. But I only had to face one of them. I only had to do time on one of them. The other one got pled down. One of them I just, I didn't show up for. The other ones were all as a minor, and I had all these issues and complications, whatever, but I was somehow able to dodge the bullet over and over and over again. And but when I was 17 years old, I was drinking with a friend, and I got arrested. I had a unusually bad day for me. I drank between me and my 2 friends, we drank 2 half gallons and a quart of vodka, and I was a little bit intoxicated, but I thought it was probably a good idea to go to work because I had a job, right? And so I showed up at work. This was between like 7 a.m. and 2 p.m. I drank all that. And I went to work. I worked in a supermarket, and I was walking for the aisles because you have to do a check every like 15 minutes to make sure there's not like broken glass anywhere. And as I was walking by the produce section, the apples looked really good. And so I started eating the apples, but I didn't want to leave them there because they had a bite out of it, so I just threw them. And I hit somebody, and they complained. They had they had no sense of humor at all. And they went and reported me to the manager and blah, blah, and then I kind of pushed the cash register over, and yeah, I don't know, anyway. Stuff happened. I sped out of the parking lot. I ran my car into like 3 different cars on the way out, and then I hit like a tree and a fire hydrant and a fence and a house and a whatever, and eventually it was like it didn't make it. And so it was collateral damage. I just sort of left it somewhere. And I had somebody give me a ride to my parents' house, and my mom heard the helicopters and all the sirens when I walked in. She said, "It's you, isn't it?" And I don't know how she knows these things, but she knew they were looking for me, and they didn't find me. And I got in a fight with my dad, and my dad ended up needing to get stitches, and I created so much destruction that day that when you're an adult, there's a charge called mayhem, and they can charge you with that, but I was an adult. They don't have a charge for minors called mayhem. It's called lack of parental control, so they charged my parents. It was great. They were so excited. And so they had to go to court for all the damage I had done, and so they were so irritated that they sent me to treatment at 17 years old. And I got there, and they're going around, what have you done, and this and that, whatever. I had tried cocaine, and I had done pot and hash and all the pills and whatever, and a lot of alcohol. And what I heard when I was in there, that my parents paid a lot of money for, we were sitting around in a little group thing, and all the people in my group said that if you're snorting cocaine, you're wasting it, right? You've either got to shoot it or you've got to smoke it, man. And I was like, this is good information. So I left treatment, and I put a needle in my arm for the first time when I was 17. And whatever, I shot cocaine every day for the next 8 months, but then the time came when I wasn't doing that anymore. And I moved on, and I moved into, I think it was mushrooms and acid then, and then I think it was something, I don't know. But I drank the whole time. And so I got sober pretty much every year between the time I was 17 and the time I was 27. Sometimes more than once, sometimes more than twice, sometimes a lot. It does whatever, right? Depending on how hot the heat is how often you get sober, right? And so I got sober and over and over and over again. And every time I got sober, I kept telling people, I'm just a drug addict. I'm not really an alcoholic. I'm just a dope fiend. I'm just a tweaker. I'm just whatever, I can do, I can drink. And I was in a sober living home, and it was on the beach. It was terrible. I surfed every day, and I remember walking out to go into the water. It was sunset, and there was a guy sitting out on the sand with his barbecue, and he had his wife had a glass of wine, and he had a beer. And I remember thinking, there's no one out here sitting on the sand shooting dope. But that guy's drinking a beer. I wonder if I can do that. And it was one of those things where it didn't really register, but it kind of stuck. And I was dating this girl, and she asked me. She said, "So let me get this straight. You won't be able to have a glass of champagne at our wedding?" And I looked at her, and in my head, I said, "Wedding? What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean wedding?" I was just so irritated. I'm like, I'm not getting married. That's stupid. But then, about 5 minutes later, I stopped thinking about the wedding, and I started thinking about that glass of champagne, and I was like, I wonder if I could have a glass of champagne. I mean, it's not really alcohol, right? I mean, it's not like beer. It's not like whiskey. It's certainly not heroin. It's not crystal meth. It's just champagne. It's like grape juice, right, with bubbles. It couldn't be bad. And it just stayed with me, and it haunted me. And I was going to meetings, and I wasn't listening. I was thinking about the sparkling grape juice with fermentation. And I was wondering, can I have champagne? Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and the day came where I had to find out, could I drink successfully? And I was 8.5 months sober at the time. And I called my sponsor and 3 friends, and I said, hey, I'm going to be the guy you take your hat off to. And that's a book reference in case you didn't know that. And they all said, no, don't do this. This is a terrible, terrible idea. And I said, no, I got it. And I walked into work, and I told my boss, I said, hey, I can't work tonight. And he said, nope, can't do it. I've already had 3 people calling sick. I have to have you here. You cannot take the night off. And I said, I don't think you were I said, I can't work tonight. I didn't say, can I have the night off? I said, I can't work tonight. And he said, if you don't work tonight, you're fired. And I said, okay. I haven't even had a drink yet. I mean, come on. So I'm fired. I haven't even had a drink. I literally walked out of the restaurant. I walked across the street into another restaurant. I walked into the bar where my girlfriend was, and I ordered a beer. And the whole thing was, I was thinking, okay, if I can not get a drunk driving tonight, if I can not beat up my girlfriend, and I can not get in a fight, we'll call it a success, right? I mean, set the bar really freaking low. That's all I need to do is just not do one of those 3 things. At 8 o'clock, my girlfriend's pulling me out of the ladies' room because I was in a fight. We set off the fire alarm, and I'm driving her car drunk, fighting with her. And I'm like, well, okay, so it didn't go so good. We'll try again tomorrow. And so I tried again the next day, and I tried again the next day, and I tried again the next day. And guess what? It didn't work. I know it sounds hard to believe, but after about 2 weeks of just and only drinking, I thought maybe I'd try some recreational cocaine, and I thought that was really stupid because you just don't get as much. You can't even stay up for more than 3 days on cocaine without getting a headache, so I thought I'd buy a big bag of speed. So my experiment was failing miserably, and it was not going well. It was not going well at all. So I go from that relationship. You know what? The good news is the whole wedding thing, it just sort of went away. She never brought it up again after I drank. It's crazy. I don't know what happened. Anyway, so I destroyed my life, and it got really, really bad. And at that point, I was really sick. I went from having a good job with a pretty girlfriend, living in a nice place, to the next thing you know, the job that I had was I was a bodyguard for a stripper service, and I was doing bachelor parties, and which turned into me literally having prostitutes, and I was living in Long Beach where like all the good pimps are, and my life got really, really ugly and dirty and nasty, and it was so bad that I was trying to escape, and I didn't know what to do. I had nowhere to go, and I was sick, and the only thing I could think of was I called my agency in Milan, and I said, hey, can I come back? And they said, yeah, we'd love to have you back. And so I thought I'd go to Europe and things would be better, and I hopped on a plane and I went to Europe, and I was there, and somewhere between the time I talked to them in the middle of December and when I showed up there on the 2nd of January, they had decided to close their doors, and I was in Milan without an agency, and I didn't have enough money to build my book back up and go to France for the collections, so I got stuck there. And I ended up getting a great job. A friend of mine owned a nightclub, and he asked me if I would help out at the club doing PR, and I said, sure. And he said he had a record deal he had to do with Sony. He asked, he goes, can you do a dance record? And I was like, sure, I don't know. He said, if you can do me a dance record, we do anything you want after that. He goes, but in the meantime, you can come work at the club. So my job, I lived in a model hotel, and my job was to make sure that there was lots of female models at the club every night. And I had an unlimited bar tab, and I had unlimited transportation. And the hotel that I lived in had 8 men and 112 women. And I did pretty well. It was good, and I was the ugly American. I was the only American PR guy over there, and I could literally do anything I wanted in Milan and not be arrested. I had a record deal with Sony. I was a PR guy for the biggest nightclub over there. I had a daily radio show on the biggest radio station over there, and I was killing it. And I was just a paid wino. That's what I was. There was a girl over there, and we were walking along one night. And I don't know how many of you are Bukowski fans, but she said, I finally figured out who you remind me of. And she said, you remind me of Henry Chinaski. And I was all, yes! I was so excited. And she's all, oh, my God, and you're even happy about it. And I was so bad, I literally just drank all day. And I didn't have any heroin. I didn't have any speed. I didn't have any cocaine. I didn't have anything because I was not doing any of that. And I got just as strung out on alcohol as I had ever been on anything else. And I proved beyond a doubt that I had alcoholism And it was every bit as bad and worse than any other addiction I'd had before, because I walked away from heroin, I walked away from speed, I walked away from cocaine, I walked away from hallucinogens, I walked away from everything when they got inconvenient. But alcohol had me, and there was nothing I could do about it, and I was literally dying of alcoholism, and I had to eventually, I had drank myself into such a state that I literally had to smuggle my clothes out of Europe in my guitar cases. I had to flee to Amsterdam to avoid prosecution because I had just wrecked shit. It happens, you know. If you drink like I drink, stuff happens. And I came back here and I got sober, and I stayed sober for about, I don't know, a month or two again. And I knew that I couldn't do heroin. I knew that I couldn't do cocaine. So I started doing speed and Talwin, synthetic heroin, and I literally did it all. And I know I'm talking a lot about drugs, but I want you to know for sure that the chemicals are not my problem. I have alcoholism. I tried to treat my alcoholism with many, many other chemicals, but the real root cause for me is alcoholism. I have this thing that when I drink, I physically cannot stop. I have an allergy to alcohol like it's talked about in the book. And I have proved it over and over and over again. And I went on my last run. I was sober for a little while. And if I had gotten sober then when I was 25, my life would have been a lot easier. But I decided one more time to take another drink. And that drink led to a really, really ugly period where all of my friends were outlaws, and I lived 100% outside the law. And everything I did, I mean, I was a one-man crime wave. I figured I was up anyways. I might as well steal shit. And everywhere I went, it was just like a wake of destruction behind me. And I used to say that my battle cry as an alcoholic was if people would just leave me alone, I'd be fine. And I said that I abandoned everyone, but the fact is that that isn't true. The fact is that there wasn't anybody that was willing to reach into me anymore. I had burned everybody so hard, so many times, that the only people that were pathetic enough to reach back in were my parents and my girlfriend, and even then it was on a limited basis. No one wanted anything to do with me, and in the last few weeks, before I got sober, all of my outlaw motorcycle friends, they told me, "You're a scene, dude. You need to stop showing up. You're my lower companions. What the fuck are you talking about?" And they literally said, "Everywhere you go, the police are sure to follow. You are not good to be around." And patched motorcycle clubs were telling me that I wasn't welcome because I was too ugly and too dirty and too nasty. And at the last, I had right at the very end. I had loaned a carburetor to a guy, and I called him to tell him I was coming to pick it up, and he was asleep. And I went to his house and I took it, and it just so happened that the warehouse that I was living in used to belong to the president of his club, and he called the president and told him I stole it. And it created a war between a few clubs, and I was going to get executed. And it was an ugly, dark time, and I almost didn't survive it. And then right after that, I got arrested. And I got arrested the last time. I got out on Thanksgiving of 1994, but I got arrested again on December 19th. I like to say I got out on Thanksgiving, but I made it back for Christmas and New Year's. And my life had gotten to a point where there was nothing left. My fiance, girlfriend, whatever you call her, she had a restraining order against me. Everything I owned was already being impounded or had been confiscated or stolen. All my cars were gone, my motorcycles were gone, my guitars were gone, all my personal belongings were gone. My last physical address was the jail I had just been released from, so I was officially homeless. And when I got arrested, they said, "What's your address?" And I said, "I don't have one." And they put the jail that I just gotten out of as my last known address. And I had long hair, and I weighed 150 pounds, and I had open sores, and I was really, truly crazy because the only times I had slept in all of 1994 was the days I had done in jail, and I'd maybe done less than 60 days that year, so I had literally been up for at least 10 months. I was totally crazy. I was armed all the time, and I was ready to kill you just for nothing. And it was a dark, ugly time, and I went to court, and they offered me 17 years. And I laughed and said, no, I can't do 17 years. I'm not healthy enough. I said, take me back to my cell. And I went down to the waiting room to go back to jail, and they said I had an attorney visit. My attorney and I, we weren't getting along at all. And I was wondering, why does he want to see me? And I walk in this room, and there was a friend of mine. His name's Darren. And the last time I'd seen Darren, he was on the run. He came to my warehouse because he'd pulled a gun on his girlfriend at the mall or something. And he went and did time, and I hadn't seen him. And he came in there, and he said that he was sober. And I laughed, and I said, I've been to Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been to Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous. I've been all over. I've had sponsors. I've done pretend fourth steps. I didn't say that. I said I've done fourth steps. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work for guys like me, man. It can't work. And he said, no, it can. And I said, I don't believe you. Put me back in my cell, and I left. And I went back to court a week later, and they offered me, they said, the best deal I'm going to get is 4 years. I can either take it or go to the box. And I said, I'll go to the box, man. I'm not doing it. And I went back downstairs, and that friend Darren, he came to see me again, and he was sitting on the other side of that glass. And he was wearing a shirt and tie. And there was something, it wasn't my shirt and tie. Every time he'd gone to court before, it was some document I manufactured for him, and he borrowed a tie, and he was sitting there. But there was something different about him, something that I'd never seen. His skin was the right color. He looked like an alien or something. Like I'd never, people that hang out with me don't look like that. His skin was flush, and he was bright and smiling. And like it talks about in the book, there was something inexplicably different about his eyes. And he looked me in the eye, and he was sober, and he had something that I knew that I had never had before. But I also knew that I couldn't have it. And he said, I might be able to get you out of here if you'll cooperate. And I said, there's no point, man. There is no point, Darren. Go help somebody that is worth saving. I am a scumbag. I'm a loser. I'm going to die an ugly, violent death any minute, and I got it coming. Go help somebody worthy of the help. And he said, no, man, I'm here for you. And he said, if you'll go where I go and do what I do, I will guarantee that you can get sober. And I didn't believe him. And I said, take me back to my cell. And I went back, and I was laying on my rack, and I was looking at those toothpaste marks on the bunk above me where people stick their pictures. And I was thinking, if I do get out of here, what could be different? I've already been arrested 6 times this year. The police know who I am. The judges know who I am. Everybody knows who I am. There's no more nice kid from Corona Del Mar. I'm going to fry. I'm going to do time. Even if I get out now, I will be back again in a month like I always do, and I will not get out that time. There's nothing that can possibly change. The only thing that might be able to change is if I had the help of God and Alcoholics Anonymous. In that moment I said, God, I will go anywhere you have me go and do anything you have me do if you help me get sober and change my life. And when I made that decision and I made that declaration, I knew that I was going to prison. I knew that I wasn't getting out. And I knew that going to prison with this spiritual holy roller crap is not cool. You don't get any Jews trying to, be a sunbeam for God in prison. And I'm thinking, but I'm going to die if I don't do it. And I made that wholehearted surrender. I admitted complete defeat. 3 days later, through some miracle I can't explain, I was out on the street. I was released to a recovery home. And what it talks about in the book, it says, when we wholeheartedly make such a decision, when we decide to go through with Alcoholics Anonymous, that sometimes the drink is removed, the desire to drink is removed. And that happened for me because the desire to drink left me that day. The obsession was gone, and I got released from jail. And the reason I know the obsession wasn't with me is because I didn't drink for the first time ever getting out of jail. And I went to a recovery home, and I hated the recovery home, and I hated everyone in it, and I hated everybody in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I hated everyone, period. And I'd go to meetings, and I'd sit there with my best don't ever talk to me look on my face. And if you get too close to me, I might hit you. I was truly crazy. I hadn't slept. I was nuts. And people said, keep coming back, but they said it from like across the room. And I was okay with that. But I kept coming back. And this little guy came up to me, he told me he was going to be my sponsor, and he told me things that I didn't want to hear. And I remember looking at him thinking, you realize I can kill you, right? And he just kept telling me the truth, and even though I didn't want it. And he introduced me to that big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went through that book with a dictionary and a highlighter. Not because I was told to, but my sponsor told me that's what he did. And he told me that he showed up early and he left late at every meeting that he went to, and I showed up early and I left late. He told me he had a commitment at every regular meeting, and I got a commitment at every regular meeting. He told me to try every commitment in Alcoholics Anonymous to find where I fit. So I went to the detox every day. I was on H&I. I did GSR. I was a secretary. I was a treasurer. I was a greeter. I did literature. I did it all. I broke the antenna off my car so we could only listen to AA speaker tapes when you rode with me, which dates me because we were still using tapes. And I fell into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I took a hold of it like my life depended on it, because it does. And I have to tell you that my life hasn't been perfect since that day, but I do have an amazing life. I have a life that is so far beyond anywhere that I ever thought I would get. And you know, when I got sober, you used to hear things in meetings where I got sober that, they say that, 3 to stay and 4 to grow, like that crap. It's not true. Going to 3 meetings a week or 4 meetings a week will not provide the much desired result. We have this thing here called a program. It's in that book. I'm here to tell you that if you do what the book says to do, you will get what the book says you will get. And I'm also here to tell you that if you're not getting what the book says you're going to get, it's because you're not doing what the book is telling you to do. People think that alcoholism is about how much you drink or how long you drink or how often you drink. It isn't. It is about the phenomenon of craving that happens when you drink. When I was 17, I was just as alcoholic as I was at 27, and I am just as alcoholic today as I was the day that I stopped drinking. Nothing has changed. I have alcoholism. It is never going to go away. But what it talks about in the doctor's opinion, as I said, this was happening over and over again, and in my life it happened over and over and over again. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. But then it goes on to say that the very same person who seemed doomed, he had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. And that's what happened to me. Sanity has returned. I look at alcohol exactly what it is, an inanimate threat. And it is nothing that I need to really be concerned about until it becomes animated. And the way that it becomes animated is if I quit doing the work. I have found that you don't have to get back to the basics if you just stick with them. I'm not doing anything different today that I was doing when I had a year. I still sponsor guys. I still read the book. I still pray on my knees. I still meditate every day. I still go to meetings. I still practice principles in all my affairs. I still take regular inventory. I seek out the things in me that are undesirable, and then I try to correct them. And I ask God what my next step should be, and He gives me the guidance that I need to handle anything that comes up in life. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were telling me that somebody that I used to sponsor was drinking, and they said, but he was having a really hard time. So, there is nothing, not one single thing, not the loss of my child or my parents, losing my legs, there's nothing in the world that would cause me to think that a drink is a viable solution to whatever I have going on. I have been restored to sanity like it talks about in the book. I love my life. Now the good news is if you're an alcoholic like I am, there's nothing in the world you can't accomplish if you're willing to do the work. Like I told you, you guys heard my story. Does it make sense that I have a machine gun license and I can make silencers and I have I'm a firearms dealer and I've been trained with all the... Dude, seriously? Quit it. But that's what I do. You can do anything if you're willing to put in the time and do the work. If you're willing to stand on the line, help alcoholics, practice these principles, and do everything that it talks about, there is nothing that you cannot accomplish in this world if you're willing to do the work. I just got to tell you, the most important promise in the book, to me it says, You know, the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. But the biggest blessing that I got is not in the book. There's no one on the planet I'd rather be than me. And if you do the work, you can have that too. Thanks.